What's up, guys? Welcome to a little bit of a different kind of video. Today we are counting down the top 5 things that I think you can do to make yourself a much better Magic player. Keep in mind that these are my opinions, so this isn't something that I think you can truly just say here are the top 5 things, but I do think that these, if followed, these 5 tips are definitely going to help you out. We're going to count these down in reverse order, and the first one here is actually just managing your expectations. I think it's really easy for a lot of people to say, well, I want to win this many times and I want to do all this. The reality is that isn't actually how it works out. If you look at the stats for pro players right now, you actually look at a 65 to 70% win rate overall. And keep in mind, that's with years and years of practice, tons and tons of events under their belt. That's not something that they just did overnight. They obviously had a lot of practice, a lot of time that they've dedicated to it, and that is full-fledged competitive play. That's not something that happens on just a daily basis. So chances are your win rate is going to be closer to that 50% mark, and hopefully you can kind of scale it up along with these other tips to help you get there. I think part of that understanding is also knowing that part of the game is luck-based. It is not just skill-based. You are really culminating the luck and the skill all together in one really awesome game, and knowing that helps you really manage the expectation of, okay, if I'm going to get flooded, I know that there is a chance that that's going to happen, or maybe I'm going to get mana screwed, or maybe I'm just not going to draw the cards that I need. I think that's really important to know ahead of time because yeah, that stuff's gonna happen. I mean, there's no way around it. It absolutely will. But knowing that ahead of time and being able to kind of accept that ahead of time means, you know what, fine, luck was not on my side. You can take that loss with a little bit more dignity, a little bit more pride, and say, you know what, it's okay. There's nothing I could have done here. And I think that we'll talk more about evaluation later on in the list, but I think that's really important to know when those things are gonna happen and expect that those things are gonna happen at some point in your career. Number 4 on the list is to do your homework. I think this one gets overlooked very easily, especially in Standard where the card pool is much smaller. I think it's really important that you know the big heavy hitting cards in the card pool because obviously you're going to run up against those in your time in Standard, and obviously you need to know how to either work around those cards or deal with those cards in a more effective way depending on the deck that you're playing. Now part of that homework I do think is also knowing some of the top decks. You don't have to know every single thing, obviously you're not going to, there's way too much, especially jumping outside of Standard when you look to Eternal formats or Commander where the card pool is absolutely massive. But it is really helpful to know at least some of the top decks and some of the things that you're going to expect to see while you're practicing, while you're evaluating and things like that. You have to know that stuff because again, you get into a game, and if you all of a sudden see, you know, a Brazen Borrower, for instance, you may not know the best way to deal with a Brazen Borrower, or how to get around it, or play around it, and you need to do that. And obviously, that's just one example, but I think that that's very important to do, and very crucial to making yourself a better player. Number 2 and number 3 kind of go hand in hand here, and I think they're really important to do together, but number 3 is testing a variety of decks. I think it's so important to, especially if you're trying to be a competitive player, to look at one list, try it for quite a while, give yourself time to really learn that deck, but then move on to another one and see how that deck performs, how that deck plays to your play style, and of course how it works in the meta. I think if you're a casual player and you're kind of just playing for fun, or you're playing on a budget, obviously that's a limiting factor, and you can't really just go out and buy every single card in the world, and so that's not going to work for the casual player. But for a competitive player, you have to know how every single deck is going to operate and just how you would operate it in these given instances. I think getting into the mindset of your opponent is so important, especially when you go to a competitive tournament and you're saying, okay, I'm up against Abzan midrange and I've got Izzet Phoenix. I'm just kind of picking 2 random decks, but you know, given that circumstance, what would the Abzan midrange deck do against my Izzet Phoenix deck, knowing that I am Izzet Phoenix? Because obviously, again, coming through that knowledge and that card pool, you should be able to figure out what you're up against very quickly, and that's going to help inform those decisions. So I think number 3, very important. Test a lot of different decks, just see what all is out there and figure out what deck works best for you. Number 2, like I said, kind of goes hand in hand with number 3 here, and I think it's just kind of going back and watching through a lot of recorded gameplay, whether that be your own or other people's, especially with the deck that you have landed on. I think it's really important, though, of course, to do that with any deck. I think it's really important to focus on your format and say, okay, if I'm in Standard, I want to know what the top 5 decks in Standard are, and those are the decks that I want to watch and really evaluate step by step through a game how they reacted to a lot of different decks. Watch, you know, if you're watching Abzan midrange, watch that against Is It Phoenix, watch that against Garuda decks, watch that against Luris decks, whatever that might be. You really have to go through, figure out how they are reacting to different situations. That way you know what to look for, and you know how to play against it if they won or lost, depending on the outcome of that video. Now, again, luck is always a big part of this. You have to manage that expectation like we've already talked about, but that's going to give you the best chance possible to really, really do your best job at winning that game. I think that's exactly what you need. It take a lot of time. I do this very regularly. There's a little bit of a tip inside of the tip, but something that I really enjoy doing is going through, watching some gameplay, and it's pausing at the start of a turn after I see what the card drawn is. I like to see, okay, now what would I do in this turn? What gives me the best chance of winning? And then see how well that matches up with what is actually done. Sometimes you find that, you know, you're completely off base and that's incorrect, and sometimes you may find that you were exactly right. Whether or not the player you watched did that or not is very, very different, but I think that that's a really good practicing, just a good way to kind of go through and practice some of these skills and figure out what the best way to handle a turn is. Number 1 on this list is a bit of an obvious one, and it kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of these things, but it's truly just to practice. You just have to get a lot of games under your belt. You have to play against a lot of, if you're trying to be competitive, play against other competitive decks. If you're just trying to have fun, just play some casual games, but you have to continue playing as much as possible to keep yourself up to date on all the new cards, the new decks that are coming out, and the best things that you can be doing. I think every time you play a deck, you learn a little bit more about it, whether it be just a very small interaction that you didn't know about, or a huge synergy that could win you the game. I've had decks where, especially user submitted decks, where, you know, I'll play test them a couple times and not truly get what the synergy is quite yet. And I think there was a perfect example yesterday with the Is It Draw deck submitted by Raptor. We got to see it kind of do its thing in game 1 of video 1, where it was really just taking off with a lot of draw synergy, dealing tons of damage to the opponent, just mowing down their creatures, and it was great. But that didn't happen to me in playtesting. I didn't see that happen in playtesting. And so for me, that was kind of a revelation moment where I was like, wow, I'm so glad that we got to do this, because that's exactly what the deck wanted to do, and we finally got there. For you guys, it was video 1. For me, it was like game 5 or something like that. And so for me, there was a bit of a process going through. And so I think that that's really, really important. I think you have to just sit down and practice. That's really all there is to it. I think you will learn so much in doing that. Go back, watch those videos over again, record yourself playing. Doesn't matter if anybody else sees it. I think the important thing is that you go back and watch those games and really figure out where maybe you lost this game, where did I mess up? Or, you know, I won this game, why did I win this game? I think you have to further question yourself every step of the way, and that's how you improve. Again, keep in mind, manage your expectations. That's all the way back to number 5, but I think it's a very important thing to do. You're not going to win every game. I know a lot of people get very frustrated when they lose, especially when you're on a streak. We've all been there. I promise you, we have all been there. It's okay to lose. It's fine. 50% of the time, you're very likely to lose. So I think the key is you just have to manage that and do the best you can. Watch other videos, know your card pool, and just practice. Practice like crazy. That's all you need to do. I really hope that these tips help you guys. Keep in mind, again, these are just kind of my opinions on some of this stuff. This is not necessarily an exhaustive list by any means, but I just wanted to get a few tips out there. I know we've kind of had some questions about it every once in a while in DMs and things, and so I just wanted to bring it up. But I hope this helps, guys. I'm really excited to jump into some gameplay, hopefully later today, so do stay tuned for that. But I will see you very, very soon in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.